The Viya REST APIs provide a way to access Viya functionality using REST calls. The REST calls can be made from any client technology that supports HTTP. This is a very powerful feature of Viya which opens up the Viya platform to enterprise application developers who wish to build applications which interact with Viya functionality. The pyviyatools are one example of an application accessing the Viya REST APIs. The tools are a set of command line tools that call the SAS Viya REST APIs from Phython. The tools can be used to make direct calls to a REST endpoint on the command line, something like a curl command, and also they provide a framework where you can build additional tools that prompt for input and make multiple REST calls to provide more complex functionality. The tools are designed to be used in conjunction with the sas-admin command line interface. The REST architecture really makes the construction of the tools very easy. Each tool does three main things. Firstly, it prompts for input on the command line. Then, it builds and makes REST calls based on the input that has been given to it on the command line. And finally, it returns the results and presents them in a variety of formats. Three Python libraries are really key to each of the three steps. The prompting steps uses argparse to create and parse the command line options, and also to provide help for each of the tools. To do the execution step, the request library is used to make REST calls, and finally, to return the results, the json library is used to parse the results of each of the REST calls. The tools are currently aimed at SAS administrators, however they could be used to build any type of functionality using the external APIs. In this slide I show you a sampling of the tools that are available. There's one that you can authenticate to the Viya admin command line interface using an authinfo file. Now that way you can protect your passwords and automate the running of your scripts. We have tools that create Viya folder structures from a CSV file, explain authorization on folders, manage files on the file service, create publishing destinations, etc. The tools are available on GitHub under SAS software and the URL is pyviyatools. Let's look at a quick demo of the tools. One of the first things we need to do when using the tool is to log into Viya. We're going to do that using the sas-admin CLI, that's the default method. That's going to give us an authentication token for 12 hours. So I'm prompted for my user ID, I enter that, enter my password, and I'm logged in. pyviyatools give us a different way to log in. So I'm going to log out and use a tool called login via authinfo, which is going to use the credentials from an authinfo file, similar to SWAT and base SAS do. That saves us from embedding the credentials within any scripts we have. It's going to read them from that secured file in our home directory. So if I do login via authinfo, it reads the credentials from that file and logs us in. To check that that works, let's use sas-admin identities who am I, just to show that we were logged in as the user that had the credentials in that file. Do identities, who am I? Perhaps we should do it using the output equals text in order to get a more readable format. So I'll add -- output text to the CLI. And you can see that we're logged on as the SAS administrator, which was the credentials that were in the file. Okay, let's get into the pyviyatools. The core tool we have is called call REST API. If I execute that, and all the tools have this built-in functionality. If I do a -h, I get help for the parameters that we pass to that file. So call REST API requires an endpoint at a minimum and a method, either a get, a put, or a post. So let's do a simple example. In this simple example, I'm going to use call REST API to look at what groups we have defined in the Viya environment. So to do that, I have to define a method, and we'll use the get method. And then I also have to define the endpoint. So my endpoint is identities / groups. And I can now run that. And I get detailed information on the groups returned in JSON format. So JSON format is a default format that's going to be returned from call REST API, but it's not very easy to look at. It's good for passing on to another step maybe. There are a couple of options I have. I can do -o for output style and do simple and I get a whole bunch of the groups listed one after the other with the key attributes for the groups. So that's one of the options. And if I recall the command again and I do -o and CSV, I will get all the groups returned and their attributes in the CSV format. Let's look at a couple of additional basic calls. I'll recall the command and I will use reports/reports to get a list of all the visual analytics reports in the environment. And let's do CSV again. When I do that, I got all the reports from the environment listed. And another one, let's try and see the folders. So we'll do folders/folders and keep CSV again, and it lists all the folders in the environment. So that's the simple usage of the call REST API tool to make REST calls to the Viya endpoints. Let's look at another tool. A simple tool built on the foundations of call REST API is getFolderID. It allows you to pass the name of a folder and return the folder's internal unique ID. So firstly, I'm going to do a get./getFolderID, and let's look at the help to see what we need to pass the folder ID. So we'll do a getFolderID-h. You can see that the one parameter I'm required to pass is the folder path. So let's recall it and do -f and the path to a folder in my Viya environment. And you can see I get the ID, the URI, and the actual path returned from the Viya software. I'm going to look now at list rules, which is a more complex tool that queries for the rules defined in the system. I've done a -h to get the help. You can see I can pass the URI. So the URI is the object URI that the rule is applied to. And I can pass the principal. So I want to see all the rules that are defined for SAS administrators. So I do a list rules.py and pass the principal SAS administrators and ask for simple output. And all the rules defined in the environment for the SAS administrators are listed, and I can scroll through them. You can see the object URI, the permissions, and the principal and the type of the rule. To extend it a bit further, I could also pass a URI. Again, if I forget the exact parameters I want to pass to the command, I can just add a -h at the end and get the parameters. So see, it's -u for URI. Let me recall the command again and do -u, and then I can do the start of any URI in the environment to see if there's a rule defined for SAS administrators for that URI. So I did /SAS visual and it didn't return anything. Let me try something different then. Let's see if there's any for backup manager, which would start with /SAS-b, and you can see there's one rule defined for backup manager where the SAS administrators have create and read permission for that endpoint. So that's one of the more complex tools. Another of the more complex tools is create folders, which creates folders from a CSV file. Here we have a CSV file called folders.csv, and I'm going to run the create folders tool, get the help, and we'll see that it takes one parameter, which is a file that contains a CSV definition of the folders that I want to create. So I'm going to do -f and pass the name of the file that we just looked at with the series of folders and run it. I get the message that the folders are creating in the environment. So I should have created an R&D folder with 3 subfolders. Let's use the CLI to go look and see if that folder actually exists. So we'll run sas-admin and set output to text and use the folders plugin. I'm going to do a list members, pass it the path of the /R&D folder, and ask for tree style output. And you can see I have an R&D folder in my environment with an analysis, a data plans, and a reports subfolder. We could also use call REST API and get folder ID to do the same sort of thing with the Viya tools, the pyviaytools. So if I do a get folders -f and pass in R&D, I'm going to get the ID and the URI of the folder. And then if I do after that, call REST API, method is get, and pass in the URI, which is the path to the folder, and also pass in /members to get the members of the folder, and do an output of CSV. It lists the 3 subfolders of that folder. So that's a brief demo overview of using the pyviyatools. As I mentioned at the start, the pyviyatools are available under SAS software and GitHub. Also, the Viya REST APIs are documented in developer.sas.com under APIs REST, and also in GitHub under SAS software. There are some REST API samples that can help you with building your own applications to call the REST endpoints. So what can you do? Well, if you have a need for them, go ahead and use the tools. You can get them from SAS software, pyviyatools on GitHub. Also, if you would like to see some additional tools, you can use issues on GitHub to request additional tools, or better still, go ahead and contribute your own tools using GitHub. Thanks for listening.